who's that? John Wayne. John. Duke. He was never called John. Duke.
Did you call him Duke right away?
Nothing else, ever.
All right, yeah.
You wouldn't dare.
All right.
She starred alongside John Wayne. She held her own against Hollywood's biggest legends. But there's one episode Angie Dickinson refuses to watch, even after 65 years. Why? Was it self-doubt, haunting memories, or a young star she never stopped missing?
Now you're pretty good, but you can be better. And then he just kept helping me, and I finally did the screen test and got the part.
Many know Angie Dickinson as the sultry star of Rio Bravo, the trailblazing lead in Policewoman, and a woman who broke every mold. But behind the poise and elegance was a memory she couldn't revisit. A performance that still stings, and a co-star whose tragic fate made it too painful to look back. In this video, we'll uncover the real reason Dickinson avoids Rio Bravo, explore the emotional depth of her career, and reveal the secret she carried for decades. Before the spotlight, long before the glitz of red carpets and the bright lights of studio sets, Angie Dickinson was simply Angeline Brown, a curious, soft-spoken girl born in the heart of North Dakota. She entered the world on September 30th, 1931, in the small town of Kulm. The second of 4 daughters in a modest German-American family, Angie's early years were far removed from anything resembling Hollywood. Her father, Leo Henry Brown, worked as a newspaper editor and publisher, a man of words, ideas, and ink-stained hands. Her mother, Frederica, known affectionately as Frida, devoted herself to raising the girls while navigating the tail end of the Great Depression. In 1942, when Angie was just 10 years old, the family packed up and moved to Burbank, California. It was a relocation driven by necessity, not ambition. Yet fate often hides in the most practical decisions. Burbank, home to Warner Brothers, Disney, and countless production studios, would soon become the backdrop of her unexpected journey into the entertainment industry. At the time, she had no aspirations for stardom. Her interests leaned more toward academia and the written word, inspired by her father's editorial pursuits. While other girls might have been dreaming of dresses and glamour, Angie was editing high school essays and scribbling out story ideas. She graduated from Bellarmine Jefferson High School with a quiet confidence and enrolled at Glendale Community College before transferring to Immaculate Heart College in Los Angeles. There, she earned a business degree, not exactly the resume of a future leading lady. She intended to become a writer or possibly work in journalism, a career where she could craft stories, not perform them. But in 1953, quite an inconsequential choice made all the difference. At that time, in her early 20s, Angie entered a local beauty pageant, almost as a dare. It wasn't vanity or dreams of stardom that prompted her to do it. It was a whim, something to do. And that contest took her to the Miss America preliminary round, where she didn't win the crown, but definitely got some attention. Casting directors took note of the poised, articulate brunette with movie star cheekbones and undeniable screen presence. She had bits of television proving to be a trickle and slightly larger ones. She started turning up in westerns, detective dramas, and the anthology series that occupied American living rooms throughout the golden age of TV. Even in the least significant roles, one could just tell there was something special about her, a mix of brains and beauty. Even with her burgeoning success, Dickinson chose to be cautious. She hadn't rushed toward fame. She studied the business, observed her co-stars, and treated every set with the respect of a classroom. Her earliest film appearances were largely small, often uncredited, supporting roles in B-movies or television westerns that lacked any real merit. Yet, increasingly with each role, her growing self-confidence and sharpened instincts found some reinforcement. She was building something. Those who worked with her felt it. For behind those bright eyes and soft-spoken words was a woman taking it all in, watching, learning, and waiting. Grounded in small-town values and a writer's curiosity, Angie was the very woman she became on screen. She didn't just want people to look at her, she wanted to mean something. And when the right opportunity came along, a breakout role in a 1959 Western that would become one of the genre's most beloved films, she would grab it. She was on the brink of her big break, rise of a new kind of star. By the late 1950s, Hollywood was shifting. The era of impossibly glamorous leading ladies was giving way to something new, something more grounded, complex, and unpredictable. Angie Dickinson fit into that evolution with uncanny precision. Her rise was not meteoric, but deliberate. She was building a reputation as a performer who could mix vulnerability with confidence, sensuality with restraint. And then came Rio Bravo. Released in 1959, Rio Bravo wasn't just another Western. It was a Howard Hawks-directed juggernaut that paired Angie Dickinson with three of the biggest names in American entertainment: John Wayne, Dean Martin, and Ricky Nelson. For Angie, still considered an emerging actress at the time, this role was a seismic moment. She wasn't just supporting talent. She was being handed a character with nuance, screen time, and importance. Her performance as Feathers, a clever and flirtatious gambler, would define a new standard for women in Westerns. What set Angie apart from many of her contemporaries was that she didn't play Feathers as a helpless damsel. She had a bite. She challenged Wayne's hardened sheriff with wit and charisma. She made audiences laugh without being comic relief, and brought romantic chemistry without becoming a prop. In short, she was unforgettable. Behind the scenes, Dickinson was anything but confident. She later admitted to feeling intimidated, especially next to Wayne and Martin, giants who carried their roles like seasoned veterans. Angie knew what she was up against. She was here to prove that she belonged, that she earned a place through talent, not simply based on good looks. But that pressure itself weighed heavily, giving one emotional fingerprint on her memories of the movie for many years to come. Meanwhile, while Rio Bravo would go on to become one of the landmark works of its genre, a film that enjoyed the kind of irresistible popular acclaim that only grew with time, Angie related to it in a way entirely her own. She knew what it did for her career. It made her a star. But it also left in its wake a churning cauldron of personal insecurities, bittersweet memories, and unresolved feelings. Every shot filmed became a photograph of her doubts, for it was an internal struggle if she ever felt that she was worthy in a cast full of legends. Yet, despite those feelings, Angie was given a favorable review for her performance. The critics called her refreshing and magnetic. The dynamic she projected in the film was popular with audiences. Production took a new notice of her. She was no longer cast merely as a beauty in period pictures. Suddenly, she was an actress of great consequence. She could carry tension, charm, and subtlety in one go. That is when her career took an unstoppable momentum. The calls to film sets and television simply poured in. For the years to come, she would do them all, from stark crime dramas to stylish heist flicks. Genre or typecasting didn't box her in, making her one of the few women in Hollywood able to hold her own in male-dominated narratives without being reduced to a sidekick or afterthought. But true to her rising star, her biggest break was also her most painful reminder. And it was what came after Ricky Nelson's tragic fate that made the past too heavy to face. The ghost in the frame. Every Hollywood legend carries their share of ghosts. Roles that linger, moments that haunt, people lost too soon. For Angie Dickinson, That ghost wore a guitar strap and had a voice that melted crowds. Ricky Nelson wasn't just a co-star in Rio Bravo, he was a symbol of innocence, youth, and unfulfilled promise. And his presence in that 1959 film has kept Angie from ever watching it again. When they met on set, Dickinson was already in her late 20s, carrying the cautious confidence of a young woman navigating a male-dominated industry. Ricky, at 18, was still straddling the line between teen idol and serious actor. Yet, there was something about him, an effortless charm, a natural gentleness that disarmed even the most seasoned veterans on set. To Angie, he wasn't just the kid with a fan base. He was present, grounded, and quietly brilliant in a way few understood. The two formed a rare bond. While many around them were caught up in the scale and pressure of working on a Howard Hawks film with John Wayne at the helm, Angie and Ricky found subtle refuge in each other's company. There were no grand romances or tabloid scandals between them, just a quiet understanding built during long days on set and between takes. For Angie, those memories became cherished and painful. Years later, when Ricky Nelson died in a tragic plane crash in 1985, the shock cut deep. He was only 45. His death wasn't just a headline. It reopened a part of Angie's heart she'd quietly guarded for decades. In that moment, Rio Bravo, a film that had launched her career, transformed into something else entirely. A time capsule, a ghost story, a reminder of what was and what would never be again. Watching the film, even as a celebrated actress decades into her career, would mean confronting the vibrant, smiling face of Ricky Nelson as it once was. Frozen in time, young, talented, full of dreams. For Angie, that wasn't just painful. It was unbearable. The sound of his voice, the way he moved on screen, the effortless cool he exuded, all of it now belonged to the past. And the past, as Angie knew, could be a cruel companion. Some moments are kinda cruel and haunting to see someone on screen, especially when that being was a living, breathing component of your story. The starkness of this reality turned what, for everyone else, might have been just a classic Western into a visual memorial for Angie Dickinson. Angie has always gracefully accepted compliments from her fans and critics for her acting in Rio Bravo and tributes to the film in retrospectives. But there is always something deeper in her eyes when Rio Bravo is brought up. It's the recognition that this film carries a kind of sorrow almost no one else can truly comprehend. Her emotions are evident in interviews where she mentions what an emotional minefield this film has been. Not for Ricky only, but for the fact that it is a version of herself long abandoned. Even when she talks about Nelson today, it's with a sound that contains both passion and pain. Most people never saw these things about him. His warmth, shyness, and steady work ethic beneath the superficial celebrity sheen. Ricky was not just pop culture for Angie. He was more of a kind soul struggling to make it through a world that demanded way too much, too soon. That world, after all, did consume him. And the act of seeing him again as he was then, full of youth and promise, is something Angie still finds impossible to bring herself to do. And yet, the emotional weight of that film would only deepen as Angie's own insecurities collided with the towering legends she shared the screen with, turning one performance into a lifelong reckoning. The insecurity behind the glamour. To audiences, Angie Dickinson in Rio Bravo was the epitome of confidence, witty, charming, and undeniably magnetic as the flirtatious gambler Feathers. But behind the scenes, she was riddled with self-doubt. While her performance suggested boldness, Angie was a young actress grappling with intense insecurity, thrust into the spotlight alongside Hollywood legends like John Wayne and Dean Martin. Though she had already logged years in smaller TV roles, Rio Bravo was her first major film, and she felt the pressure immediately. Directed by the legendary Howard Hawks, the film was a high-profile project, with stars whose presence could dominate any scene. Angie wasn't just expected to keep up. She had to shine in a male-dominated story where the margin for error was razor-thin. Hawks believed in her. He saw in Angie a rare combination of sex appeal, intelligence, and subtlety. But she didn't yet see those qualities in herself. She later admitted that every day on set felt like a test of her worthiness. Each line was something to survive, not savor. Even though she delivered a compelling, memorable performance, Angie privately battled the fear that she wasn't good enough. Working with John Wayne only intensified that anxiety. Known for his larger-than-life screen persona and commanding presence, Wayne set a high bar. Though he treated Angie respectfully, there was an unspoken challenge in every shared scene to prove she belonged. Dean Martin brought a more relaxed energy, but his effortless charm also reinforced Angie's feeling that she was the novice among giants. These insecurities didn't fade when filming ended. In fact, they left a lasting impression. For years, Angie avoided watching Rio Bravo, not only because of the painful memories surrounding co-star Ricky Nelson, but because it reminded her of a version of herself still searching for confidence. To see that young woman on screen, poised but privately unraveling, was simply too difficult. Feathers, a character who was much bigger than the normal female characters, demanded at that moment. Angie has to bring forth an attractive idea that sounds real, forceful without arrogance, vulnerable without weakness. Critics later complimented the way she performed, but Angie knew it wasn't polished. It was instinct. Figuring it out as she went, she held it all up under crushing pressure. The context of the genre added to its already existing enormity. The 1950s Western was male territory, full of gunslingers and stoic lawmen with rough landscapes. Women usually were either to the side, but Feathers was none of these. She was intelligent, humorous, and willing to resist. Angie breathed life into the character with a quiet fire. But it also meant that one would juggle a vigorous script combined with the invisible weight of gender. She knew one misstep could put her in the mold of a pretty face in a man's job. Angie confessed that she could not sit through Rio Bravo again, not because her performance was bad, but rather the film showed her at her most vulnerable. What appeared as assurance was a mask for survival. Behind the glitter, a woman was trying hard not to crack. In retrospect, Rio Bravo was a success. It flagged the front of Angie's film career and showed she could hold up against the greats. But for her, it was not an easy journey. It was hard-earned, scene by nerve-wracking scene. The film serves as a testimony not only to an award-winning role, but also to how a young woman fought to believe in herself. For such brilliance, the viewers clench. For Angie, it's the pain of becoming. And just when the pressure felt like it couldn't get heavier, life off-screen began to mirror the very storms she was fighting through on camera. A lifetime of breaking barriers. Despite her private insecurities, Angie Dickinson built a groundbreaking career by quietly defying expectations. She didn't cling to convention. She reshaped it. Long before it was common for women to lead crime dramas or challenge male-driven narratives, Angie was doing exactly that, often without fanfare or demand for recognition. Rio Bravo may have launched her career, but it was just the beginning. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, Angie chose roles that combined sensuality with intelligence, two traits rarely allowed to coexist in female characters at the time. She didn't settle for being a sidekick or love interest. She played women with agency, humor, and depth. Then came Policewoman in 1974, a watershed moment in television history. As Sergeant Pepper Anderson, Angie became the first woman to lead a network TV police drama. This wasn't a gimmick or a novelty. Policewoman was a serious procedural, and Angie's character was its emotional anchor. She went undercover, chased criminals, and outperformed her male colleagues. It was bold television, and Angie carried it with ease. Audiences responded. Policewoman ran for 4 successful seasons, earned her a Golden Globe, and brought multiple Emmy nominations. But its true impact was cultural. Women who had never seen themselves as authority figures on screen suddenly had a heroine who was capable, flawed, and real. Angie gave that role authenticity, and it resonated deeply. However, the behind-the-scenes way was rather difficult. There was no precedent for a crime show harboring a female lead, and the studio execs hesitated. The networks were unsure that viewers could accept a woman in charge. Angie had to prove time after time that she was able to carry a drama, and not just as a token, but as the centerpiece. And she did it, made the groundbreaking feel like it was nothing special, even if it really was. Her film roles after Policewoman continued to push boundaries. In Dressed to Kill in 1980, she played a middle-aged woman coming to terms with identity, desire, and vulnerability. The opposite of the polished housewives, most actresses over 40 were assigned. Angie embraced the raw, complicated edges of her character, with excellent reviews for the performance. She did not pursue youth or glamour. She pursued truth. Off-screen, Angie also defied expectations. She resisted being boxed in by the tabloid image of the Hollywood starlet. While many of her peers were pushed toward scandal and spectacle, Angie carved her own path, connecting with intellectuals, engaging with politics, and traveling internationally. Her friendships with figures like economist John Kenneth Galbraith and her cultural exchanges abroad reflected a mind as curious and grounded as it was glamorous. She remained private, setting boundaries in a business that often blurred them. By not playing the media's game, she quietly redefined what it meant to be a public woman in Hollywood. Her refusal to overexpose herself was its own quiet act of rebellion. Angie Dickinson definitely has her legacy, not merely by her filmography, but also with the taboos that she shattered. There was subtlety, there was strength, there was steadiness. This woman proved that an intelligent, complex female could walk through the pages of male-oriented scripts. She has shown how to humanize, and not just perfect, in the character representations. On screen and off, she changed the definition of women and how society perceived them without any dramatic roar from her part. What she left behind is more than fame. The path forward for women in Hollywood, for complex female storytelling, and for anyone who's ever wanted to be more than what the industry allowed. But even for a woman who spent her life pushing past boundaries, there remained one role that cut too close, one performance frozen in time that she still could not face. The private pain that shaped her. Behind the camera flashes, the red carpets, and the groundbreaking roles, Angie Dickinson carried a quiet sorrow that would shape her life far more than fame or accolades ever could. For all her public strength and professional triumphs, Angie was also a mother navigating one of the most emotionally grueling journeys imaginable. A journey defined by love, confusion, resilience, and heartbreaking loss. In 1966, she gave birth to her only child, Leah Nikki Bacharach, with her then-husband, celebrated composer Burt Bacharach. From the beginning, Nikki's development was different. At a time when awareness around autism was nearly non-existent, Dickinson and Bacharach struggled to understand why their daughter didn't respond to the world like other children. Eventually, Nikki was diagnosed with a form of autism, though the medical community of the 1970s had few answers, limited support, and no roadmaps for what that truly meant. Angie, who had lived her life in the spotlight, found herself immersed in a far more private and isolating challenge: raising a child with special needs in a world that didn't understand or accommodate them. Where many celebrities of the era might have hidden such personal struggles from public view entirely, Angie didn't hide Nikki, but she also didn't put her on display. Instead, she stepped back. She refused roles. She delayed projects. She chose motherhood over momentum, fully devoting herself to her daughter's care. While Burt Bacharach's career continued to soar with chart-topping hits and collaborations with legendary artists, Angie was left to shoulder much of the emotional labor. She became Nikki's constant, her advocate, her protector, her link to a world that often felt cold and unwelcoming. The strain on their marriage was inevitable. Though they remained together for many years, they eventually divorced, leaving Angie to navigate single motherhood amid ongoing medical and emotional challenges. In rare interviews, Angie spoke about her experiences regarding Nikki and how those experiences affected her life and choice. They did not become an excuse for her. A life in the spotlight could not offer pity to her, so much as for a quiet acknowledgement that they were the making and breaking of her, when no role could. Beyond all the glamour of arcane sets and awards, her nights were filled with tension, with watching, with wondering what would come tomorrow for her child. And maybe, with great pain, she witnessed how Nikki's struggle would worsen into her adult years, showing signs of social withdrawal and the onset of serious emotional challenges. In the year 2007, the unimaginable happened. At the age of 40, Nikki ended her own life. For Angie, it was more than just the loss of a child. It was the collapse of a purpose. So much of Angie's life had revolved around caring for Nikki, around protecting her from a world that never understood her. She was gone. Nothing could ever lessen the weight of that heartache, not even a spotlight, not even an award, and definitely not a public tribute. Those close to Angie say she was never quite the same again. She did not disappear from public view, but something in her bright eyes went dim. Her public appearances became infrequent. Her interviews turned introspective. Generally, she kept it together, but in those heavy moments, a heaviness seeped through her words, a heaviness born not of regret, but one of a depth that was beyond the ability of the screen to ever convey. And Angie found a different kind of strength in this pain, the kind forged not in success but in survival. Yet anyone who knows her, or even saw her work closely, knew that something between her performances was an expression of a very deep feeling, in her silences, in her eyes. The way she now selects roles is with more specificity than ever after Nikki's death. That private pain, the love, the loss, that silent nights spent worrying became the foundation for the resiliency she forged deep within. It became the concrete lesson for her. What mattered in life grounded her deeper than Hollywood could ever do. And it created a legacy full of humanity that few others from this era of actresses could touch. But that legacy, for all its complexity and strength, circles back to one story Angie has never been able to fully confront. One performance, one film, one face frozen in time that she still avoids to this day. Why Rio Bravo still remains unwatched. For millions, Rio Bravo is a Western classic, directed by Howard Hawks and starring legends like John Wayne, Dean Martin, and Ricky Nelson. But for Angie Dickinson, whose breakout role as Feathers earned critical praise, the film remains unwatched. Not once in over 6 decades has she revisited it, not out of dislike, but because it's too emotionally charged to face. On paper, Rio Bravo should have been a dream. At 27, Angie was cast in a major studio film alongside some of Hollywood's biggest names. The opportunity was career-defining, but it also came with immense pressure. John Wayne was at the height of his fame, Dean Martin had charm and screen presence to spare, and Ricky Nelson was a teen idol with a devoted following. Angie, still finding her footing, walked onto a set where the stakes felt impossibly high. The experience left a lasting impression. Though she delivered a performance praised for its warmth and wit, Dickinson never felt she measured up. She admitted years later that she was consumed with self-doubt throughout filming, feeling underprepared and intimidated by the powerhouse cast. While critics saw natural chemistry and screen presence, Angie saw only nerves, mistakes, and raw uncertainty. Yet her reluctance to revisit Rio Bravo runs deeper than performance anxiety. The emotional heart of her avoidance is tied to Ricky Nelson. Nelson played Colorado Ryan, the quiet gunslinger. Off-camera, he and Angie developed a gentle friendship. Despite their age gap and different stages in fame, they connected as 2 young stars navigating a high-pressure Hollywood machine. For Angie, Ricky was not simply a co-worker. He was an evanescent image of a virtue and kindness that rarely visited the industry. Their friendship was quiet and personal. It was anchored in a shared understanding and what little time they had between takes for brief, yet meaningful fun. The passing of Nelson in a tragic plane crash in 1985 at 45 shattered this bond. He remained in her memory as the sweet, down-to-earth young man with a guitar and a shy smile. To see Rio Bravo would mean to see the boy banked up, living, breathing, and full of promise. But it also meant facing an earlier version of herself, tentative and vulnerable, standing beside legends, and doubting her place alongside them. For Dickinson, the film is not just a movie. It is a time capsule for a moment she has chosen to preserve in memory rather than re-experience. In her words, Rio Bravo would now be like the sight of some ghosts, as well as Ricky, her own too. Memory would rush back on her with every single frame to remind her of who she was, who she had not yet become, and what was lost too early. Mistakes may fade with time, but for Angie, the film remains as fresh and painful as in 1959. Since then, Dickinson has done much more than break barriers on television, notably with her starring role on Policewoman. She has also taken complex roles on screen. The actress has endured personal heartbreaks, all the while living her life fully and influentially beyond the brief early stardom of a Western. That one movie was her big break, and it remains untouched by her. It is not avoidance, it is reverence. Rio Bravo placed Angie Dickinson in the annals of Hollywood history, yet it also left a deep-seated pain. To leave it unseen is to safeguard a holy shrine that belongs both to the memory of a young co-star she cared for deeply and to the uncertain girl she once was. For the world, Rio Bravo is an absolute masterpiece. For Angie, far too tender a moment to revisit, and one she has chosen to honor by keeping it just as it was. To watch it now would not only disturb the delicate peace she's made with the past, but risk unraveling the quiet strength she's spent a lifetime building since. Angie Dickinson's refusal to rewatch Rio Bravo isn't a rejection of the film. It's a testament to the depth of feeling behind it. In a world that demands stars be flawless, she has always been honest, human, and unafraid to show her heart. If you were moved by Angie's story, Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more untold Hollywood moments. And don't miss the next video on your screen for another deep dive into the legends we thought we knew.